A large-scale civilian humanitarian mission has failed in its attempt to break the Israeli siege on Gaza and deliver symbolic aid to the besieged enclave. On Friday, Israeli forces intercepted the last vessel from the flotilla headed for Gaza, arresting around 450 activists. The convoy had been sailing in international waters, a move that drew accusations from world leaders, rights groups and maritime law experts who condemned Israel's actions as a violation of international law. Protests erupted in cities across the globe in response. This is the moment the crew of the last boat in the flotilla trying to reach Gaza realize their mission is over. Seconds later, Israeli soldiers boarded their vessel and ordered them to raise their hands. Moments after, the live broadcast signal was cut. These activists have now joined the hundreds already detained by Israel. Reports suggest that all will likely be deported, along with the more than 470 activists seized during previous attempts to breach the blockade and deliver aid. One of the activists on the intercepted vessel described the incident bluntly. "This is real abuse. They're committing a crime. The sea belongs to everyone. They have every right to come and to deliver food." The interception has intensified global outrage over both Israel's blockade of Gaza and the worsening humanitarian crisis inside the territory. In Barcelona, thousands marched through the streets, demanding an end to what they described as collective punishment of civilians in Gaza. In Geneva, several thousand demonstrators gathered spontaneously to denounce Israel's actions and show solidarity with Palestinians. Protest organisers there declared, "Today we are gathered to demand the release of all activists who were detained by Israel during the non-violent humanitarian mission to the Gaza Strip," with humanitarian aid protests also erupted in Brazil, where activists and students urged the release of the flotilla's crews and called on their government in Brasilia to sever diplomatic ties with Israel. In Italy, tens of thousands marched peacefully through Rome. However, scattered acts of vandalism and clashes were reported following rallies in other cities, including Turin and Milan. The Italian protests evolved into a general strike organised by several unions. Activists there not only condemned the treatment of the flotilla's crews, but also decried the continued killing of civilians and children in Gaza. To understand the mood on the ground in Italy, we spoke with freelance journalist Alina Trapattoni in Rome. Well, they basically say enough is enough. There's been way too much violence, and they're calling on the Italian government to officially recognise the state of Palestine and also to call the violence to confirm that it is genocide. Now, of course, confirming that it is genocide has a whole series of implications in terms of international law. And the Italian government is very much dragging its feet on this compared to other European countries, including the UK, Spain and the Netherlands, that have made this affirmation and condemned it for genocide. Italy yet still has to go down this route. Of the hundreds of activists detained by Israel, about 40 were Italian nationals, including members of parliament. According to Trapattoni, they've already come back to Italy because behind the scenes, the Italian government has been very active in trying to placate tensions and urging Israel not to take out any force, not to put anyone in danger, and actually in negotiating the release of the Italians that have been detained in Israel as soon as possible. It was said that they would be returned within 24 to 48 hours. The Italian government has said it won't pay for their flights back, but the consulates and the embassies on site will be providing full assistance, and evidently have been, because 4 of the members of parliament have already returned to Rome. There's an informal poll circulating that apparently the government has seen and that has caused grave concern within cabinet members, that states that 80% of Italians back a firm position in terms of Gaza, in terms of calling the violence there genocide, and in terms of recognising the state of Palestine. Now, 80% of a population of 60 million is a very large number. It's a huge chunk of public opinion. So that's creating huge domestic pressure on Italian Premier Giorgia Meloni. What the protests are unique because they cut through all different political colours. You have people from the extreme left, from the extreme right. They cut through all swaths of society. You have people in their 70s and 80s. I even saw someone in their 90s today. You have children, university students. You have managers from multinationals. You have office workers, street cleaners, musicians, artists, the works. So it's very widely felt. People tell me they're not going to stop until something gives because, as one person said, we are the flotilla of the land. They may have detained the seaborne flotilla, but we are here in tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, possibly millions, and they're not going to stop until action is taken. Meanwhile, one of the intercepted flotilla boats managed to dock in Cyprus. It's a small craft, a leisure craft, a motorboat. We don't know the name of it, and the Cypriot government hasn't told us the name, but our cameras did see its registration, 2966DX. We know it was in waters towards Gaza. We believe it was intercepted, turned early yesterday afternoon, and requested permission to dock at Larnaca here on the east coast of Cyprus late last night. The government approved that, and it is still here in the main dock. Asked whether the boat was boarded, Molly explained, "We don't believe it was boarded. We understand that it went towards an Israeli patrol and then turned, but we're not absolutely clear of the circumstances of what happened late yesterday afternoon. We know there are 21 passengers. 2 of them are reported to have some kind of chronic health problems." That's what we heard from the government spokesman here. That's the reason they got swift permission to land, because they said, "We've got 2 people on board who are ill." The government said, "OK, come in." And they were escorted into Larnaca port at around 10:35 last night. An ambulance was dispatched to the boat, but those 2 people didn't actually leave the boat. They were checked by nurses and are still on board. Yes, it is. It's the main story here, and indeed the situation in Gaza has been a top story on the island since October 2023. There's a big population of Israelis living here and a large population of Arabs from the Near East as well. We saw a demonstration last night in support of Gaza outside the Foreign Ministry. When this boat docked in Larnaca, there was a reception committee. They'd heard about it. Some politicians, some activists were outside the gate at Larnaca port applauding them. So this is very much a big story here on the island, and I suspect it will continue to be so. My understanding is that the boat is now refueling. We've heard conflicting reports. One of the crew members apparently said they would be returning to Gaza. The other school of thought is that they would be heading towards a nearby destination, possibly the Greek islands or the Greek mainland. But I've heard they are refueling. They've had supplies taken on board, so it's entirely possible they may try and return to Gaza. We've also heard in the past hour or so that another boat is heading towards Cyprus, and if it gets into Cypriot territorial waters and requests permission to land, the government here has indicated that they will allow it to dock in Larnaca as well. The interception of the flotilla in international waters has become the latest flashpoint in the long-running conflict between Israel and Palestinian territories. Critics argue that the act undermines international maritime law and further escalates tensions at a time of worsening humanitarian conditions in Gaza. Across Europe and beyond, the events have galvanized public opinion, uniting citizens across political and social divides. The movement now extends beyond seaborne convoys, with growing numbers describing themselves as a flotilla of the land, determined to continue pressing governments for concrete action. As protests persist and more boats attempt to sail, the situation in the eastern Mediterranean remains volatile, a potent reminder of how humanitarian efforts at sea can ignite political storms on land.